Before I get started, I want to acknowledge the injustice going on that people are rightfully protesting the world over. I'm a firm believer and advocate for the Black Lives Matter movement and really hope that real change can come from the protests and the petitions, etc. that are happening right now, because enough is enough. I understand that I will never understand, but I stand with you. I've linked some petitions and charities down below that you can sign or donate to aid Black communities and help the protesters in the United States and in Australia, and I encourage you to educate yourself on what you can do to help in your local areas. Hi, I'm Nat. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new. I did take a couple of weeks off posting because I felt it was inappropriate to promote myself or my writing during this time. So I've been primarily using my Twitter and Instagram, both to talk about what's going on in my life, but mostly to highlight the Black Lives Matter cause and why it's important. I'll continue to sign, donate, aid as much as I can in any way I can, but I am trying to integrate some regular content back into my life just to regain a little bit of stability in this crazy world. Racism is not a problem that's going to be eliminated overnight, and so I encourage you to continue fighting, to continue to stay up to date on what's going on, despite the fact it may no longer be trending or being widely covered by traditional media. On to the topic of today, the other elephant in the room, coronavirus. As I've mentioned in my previous videos, I do have a tendency to procrastinate, and it is something I have been really working on this year, but also this year has really been putting my tenacity to the test. I'm just gonna backtrack in time for a minute. So this year I've been trialing quarterly goals as opposed to my previous norm of bi-monthly goals. I just thought with the scale of progress I'm hoping to make with my projects this year, I needed a bit longer than 2 months to complete the goals. My memory card just cocked it for a second and now I can't tell if this is in the same position, but like, it's fine. So jumping back to March, I was finishing up my goals for the first quarter and preparing to set new goals for the next quarter. My main goal for January through March was to finish my outline, which I did do with a couple weeks to spare. So my next big goal that I was setting myself for the current quarter that we're in now was to write an 80,000 word first draft of my novel, which was what I had been outlining in the previous quarter. Now at the time that I was finishing up my outline, things really started to kick off in Australia in terms of the COVID-19 situation and response. So around that time we started to see some fatalities and increasing number of cases, so obviously restrictions were put in place. The company I work for is an American company with stores all across the world, and so they issued a global response to COVID by closing all stores. Sorry, I forgot to say, they temporarily closed all the stores. But basically we had no idea when we would be going back to work. Now it is worth noting I do work 2 jobs and my second job was deemed essential somehow, so I was still working a little bit, but the hours that I had free during the day multiplied dramatically. Because I'd gone from working 6 full days a week to 3 half days, I decided it was the perfect time to get a head start on my goal for the following quarter. We were still in March here, and I could basically pretend I was a full-time runner till I got back to work. It took me 14 days, creeping into the beginning of April now, to write my first 15,000 words on this draft. Now that's 14 writing days. There were 4 or 5 days in between where I didn't write, so it's closer to 3 weeks in actual time, but I'm talking 14 writing days. And then by April 15th, halfway through the first month of the quarter, I hit 20,000, felt like a huge milestone. My new goal, just to get to the end of April, not for the whole quarter, was to get the first act written, so the first 9 or so chapters, and have it sent out to a friend or two for some feedback. You know, just in case I needed to make any big structural changes that they pointed out, like, this is really not working for you. This is when my plans started to derail. I finished my first act just shy of 26,000 words, 2 days before the deadline I had given myself, and I just wanted to revise over it a little bit before sending it to my friends. But as I was doing this quick edit, I realised that there were like 3 specific chapters that I was very unhappy with. That was the first snag I hit that really slowed me down. The main issue is that I just overcomplicated the scenes, and while that sounds like a kind of easy fix, like just simplify it, it was really hard to do so while keeping the integrity of the plot. I still ended up sending it to my couple of friends for some feedback, just, you know, with the preface that there were a few chapters that needed some fixing. But I was still really struggling to move forward at this point. So I was then struggling with that, but also just struggling mentally with the fact that we were kind of in isolation, but I was still having to work. things weren't really closing as much as I'd seen them closing in other parts of the world, and I was worrying that that was going to mean we had a bigger spike in this country. This whole pandemic has probably been a lot for many people. I was really starting to feel it myself at this point, and it really didn't help with my productivity. Being stuck at home for the most part without any sort of physical interaction with people. I'm a hugger. Constantly worrying about the state of the world, whether someone I loved would catch the virus, whether I would catch the virus from some idiot customer who stood a bit too close. It all just really put me into a funk that I struggled to get out of, and I'm still trying to work out how to manage. This really affected the progress that I was making with my writing. So when I sent my chapters to my friends, I was on about 27,000 words, and I've only gotten up to about 28 now. Like, this is how much I've been struggling since then, and we're already in June. So at the end of April, I started to slowly integrate going back into work, and then we reopened and officially went back to work at the beginning of May. We were nearing halfway through the quarter, and I had not yet reached the 50% point in the book. I was barely past the first third, and now I had to go back to working 6 days a week. There's still restrictions going on. I still can't really see my family as much as I'd like. I really struggled to get back into writing with as much gusto as I had for the first portion of the quarter, because firstly I was still struggling with those 3 chapters that I needed to rework. Like, I just could not work them out. I then realised that what I'd written right after those problematic chapters, it was kind of a little weak, and I wasn't really happy with that either, but I'd just written something to try to move forward. But now on top of all that, I was working 37 plus hours a week. And my hours are not the same as they were before COVID. I would work my regular job and then go to my second job afterwards a few nights a week. And now that's been flipped because of restricted opening hours. I am working in the mornings instead, before my regular job. And I am not in any way a morning person. Getting up before the crack of dawn, it's making me really struggle both physically and mentally. It's destroying me. I know that sounds dramatic. It's been like 3 months and I never want to see 5:30 AM ever again. While I used to write on the nights I didn't work and then on my day off, I am now too exhausted after a long day. Even though I have more evenings free, I'm just so exhausted from getting up early, and I don't want to stay up too late most nights because I know that I'm going to have to get up early the next day. The exhaustion is really tough to push through at the best of times to get writing done, but at this point I know that there's so many things that I need to go back and fix before I can convince myself to move forward. It makes it seem like a much bigger task than it probably is, and it makes it really hard for me to find the motivation to actually do it. I cannot imagine how exhausted healthcare workers must be at this point. It's been going on for so long. Honestly, they deserve a medal. All of them. As I've said, we're into June now, and I've barely managed to push past the 28,000 word mark at the time of filming this. So I'm definitely not on track to finish my 80,000 words in the next 2 weeks until the end of the month. I think when something like this happens, it's really hard to predict how you're going to react to it. This is unprecedented. It's really hard to know how productive you're going to be, how your mood's going to be, how it's going to affect your mental health. And I think it's okay to accept that a lacking in motivation or creative juices is totally normal considering the shit show that is 2020. And I'm just trying not to be too hard on myself, and I really urge you to also not be hard on yourself if your writing hasn't gone to plan during coronavirus. And if it has, or if you've managed to increase productivity from being at home, I truly, from the bottom of my heart, applaud you and congratulate you. But for those of you who are like me, just remember that during this time of a pandemic and protesting and racial injustice and rigorous social distancing, it's okay to feel a little bit lost. And it's okay to shift your focus a little bit. My change in routine has really not done me any favors at this point, but I have made this channel to keep myself accountable. So in the spirit of accountability, I'm going to change my goals. I know we're basically at the end of the quarter, but I'm going to change my goals just so that I can feel like I have had a little bit of a win. I'm going to set some goals that are more achievable and realistic for what I know that I can get done in these 2 weeks. Goal number 1 is to work out how to rework those 3 chapters that I'm struggling with. I'm not committing to rewriting them because that is something that can happen in draft 2. I think if I just know how I'm going to fix it, it will make me feel better and I can put it out of my mind and just move on. Goal 2 is to continue to push on into Act 2 and reach 30,000 words. I'm hoping that these new goals will be able to put a new pep in my steps so I can move forward and just pretend that this whole thing never happened. Before I go, I just want to let you know some things that I have been doing. Even though I've been stuck with this project, I haven't wanted to let my writing muscle relax completely, so things I've been doing during this time is driving to and from work. I'm listening to my writing playlists, which I normally only listen to when I'm outlining. If I'm actually writing, I tend to just listen to like background noises for D&D, like crackling fire sounds, nighttime forest sounds, things like that. So I listen to those writing playlists to try to get me back into a mental state to at least think about my characters, even if I'm not actively writing it. Another thing is if I'm inspired by other projects that I have on the back burner, I will just write little scenes for them here and there to come back to later, just so that I feel like I'm doing something even if it's not what I necessarily need to be doing. If you've also been struggling to stay as productive as you'd hoped during this pandemic, I'd like to know if you picked up any tips or tricks that helped grease those creaky joints, writing joints. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening to me ramble. Leave a comment and let me know if the coronavirus has changed the way you write, whether it be for better or for worse. I'm interested to see. I once again urge you to please check out the resources I've linked down below in support of the Black Lives Matter movement. If you're interested to see how many words I can get written by the end of the month and whether I'll achieve my goals, please consider subscribing. Thanks for watching, and until next time, bye!